I priced the same scraping job on all three proxy types last month. Data center addresses came out at about $2 for the month, residential at roughly 60, mobile at 480. All three would have worked on that target. That is the sentence nobody in my industry says out loud, so I am putting it first and spending the rest of this explaining why it is true. The verdict up front: if nothing is checking where your traffic comes from, buy data center addresses and stop thinking about it. That covers more jobs than anyone selling proxies wants to admit. If the target refuses hosting ranges, step up to residential and watch your traffic volume rather than your address count, because volume is what you are actually paying for there. If the target treats a carrier address differently from a home connection, and you have measured that rather than assumed it, mobile earns its price. Start at the bottom, move up only when something pushes you. I sell the top tier, hold that against everything I say for the next 10 minutes. Why I get to compare these: I run the mobile side myself, real SIM cards on Singapore carriers, modems on a shelf in my flat, about $10 a month per line in data, and another $1.50 in modem depreciation. The powered hub that feeds around 30 ports cost $150, and the box driving all of it was $200. I also buy the other two types every month because a lot of my own work does not need what I sell. So I have paid all three bills, and I have seen what each one gets you. Four things actually differ: where the address is registered, how many other people are sitting on it with you, what unit you pay in, and how it behaves when something looks up its reputation. Everything else on a proxy sales page is decoration around those four. Where the address is registered, every block of addresses on the internet is registered to an organization, and that registration is public. Anybody can look up an address and see who holds the block and which network number it belongs to. That lookup is the entire first stage of classification. One query, no cost, and the answer sits in a cache afterwards. Block registered to a hosting company, that is a data center address, and no household has ever lived there. Block registered to a consumer internet provider, that is somebody's home. Block registered to a mobile carrier, that is a phone. There is no clever detection in any of this. It is a database lookup that a first-year developer could wire up in an afternoon, which is why the tier argument gets settled before your request is even read. How many people share it? On data center, you are either alone on a dedicated address or sharing a pool address with some number of other customers you will never see. The cheap pools are the shared ones, and you inherit whatever the last person did with that address. I have bought pool addresses that arrived already refused by the target on day one for reasons that had nothing to do with me. On residential, the address belongs to one household. The provider routing you through it may also be routing 3 other customers through it at the same moment, and you do not get told which. Mobiles different in kind here, and this is the part worth understanding properly. A carrier does not hand every phone its own public address. Hundreds or thousands of subscribers sit behind a single one through carrier-grade address translations. Your scraper shares an exit with real people checking football scores and messaging their families, so refusing that address costs the site real customers. That is the whole mechanism people are paying for. It has nothing to do with the proxy being sophisticated and everything to do with the collateral damage of blocking it. What unit you pay in, this is where most budgets get destroyed. Data center is sold per address per month, $1 or $2 each, cheaper in volume, and the traffic is usually unmetered or metered so loosely you will never touch the ceiling. Mobile is sold per line per month. There is a physical SIM and a physical modem behind every single one, so the price floor is hardware and a carrier bill. No software trick moves it. Residential is sold per gigabyte. That changes the entire shape of the decision because your address count stops mattering and the weight of your pages starts mattering instead. The number almost nobody measures: a fully rendered product page with images and fonts and half a dozen tracking scripts runs 2 to 4 megabytes. The JSON endpoint sitting behind that same page runs 20 to 40 kilobytes. That is a factor of 100 on identical data. 100,000 requests is 250 gigabytes if you render everything, and about 3 gigabytes if you go straight at the data underneath. At $3 a gigabyte, one of those bills is $750 and the other is $9. So measure the bytes your job moves before you compare any two prices. I have sat through hour-long arguments about per gigabyte rates between people who had never once looked at their own page weight. Data center, honestly, the tier everyone is slightly embarrassed to admit they use. It is instantly classifiable, and that is the entire objection to it. Anyone who wants to refuse hosting ranges can do it with a lookup and a list, where for an enormous share of real work, nobody is refusing anything. Public data portals, government statistics, documentation sites, at least you hold a key for, small business pages, your own infrastructure, none of that is defended, and paying 100 times more to visit it politely is just setting money on fire. I point my own uptime monitoring at data center addresses. I sell mobile lines and I do not spend them checking whether my own page is loaded. There is a speed argument too. A data center address is a machine in a rack on a fat link, lower latency, higher throughput, and far fewer strange intermittent failures than any consumer connection will give you. Residential, honestly, sourced from consumer connections, real home internet, real household router, an address that belongs to a person who lives somewhere. It clears the registration filter that catches data center, and per unit of work, it is a fraction of mobile when your pages are light. Now the part the sales page skips. Those connections belong to people, and those people agreed to something at some point. Usually a free app that shipped with a routing SDK inside it, sometimes a browser extension, sometimes a free VPN that pays for itself by selling the exit out the other side. Occasionally the consent is clean, and the person on the other end is paid or gets a service they actually wanted. Occasionally it is 4 lines buried in an agreement nobody has ever read. I am not accusing any specific supplier of anything. I am saying it is a fair question to ask yours, and the answer tells you plenty. Where do the exit notes come from? What does the person on the other end receive? Can they leave? A supplier with a clean answer gives it in one message. If that question makes your account manager go quiet, you have learned something about whose home connection your traffic is running through. Mobile, honestly, the one I sell, so discount accordingly. A mobile line is a physical SIM in a physical modem, drawing power, sitting on a shelf, attached to a carrier's network. That is why it costs what it costs and why nobody can conjure 1,000 more of them overnight. One line is one address at a time. If you want 40 concurrent identities, you buy 40 SIMs and 40 modems and enough powered hub capacity to keep all of them awake. The cost climbs in a straight line, and no volume discount bends it very far. What the money buys is that shared carrier address and the crowd of ordinary subscribers on it. It is expensive for a site to treat that address as disposable. You also get rotation that is genuinely a new address, because asking the carrier for a fresh session hands you one out of the carrier's own pool. What you do not get is immunity. No address type is unblockable, and anyone using that word is selling you a story rather than a product. Behavior still gets a job caught on any tier. I have watched a mobile line get shut out in about 90 seconds because of what the software behind it was doing. Where mobile genuinely earns it, in my experience, is work that needs a small number of durable identities that stay put, rather than a wide pool of disposable ones. That is a narrower set of jobs than my order book suggests. The rule I give people now: run 100 requests to a data center address first. If you get back what you asked for, you are finished, and the experiment cost you about $2. If you do not get what you asked for, find out which part failed before you upgrade anything. The address is one candidate out of several, and it happens to be the one with a payment link attached. If you do have evidence that the address type is the problem, meaning the identical request works from an ordinary home connection and fails from the hosting address, then move up exactly one tier, residential before mobile. Most people skip the middle entirely. They go straight from $2 to $480 and never find out that 60 would have done it, and write down what you find. The tier that worked on one target tells you almost nothing about the next one, and I have made that assumption twice now. What I got wrong: for about a year I recommended mobile as the default answer. Someone would describe a job, I would say mobile lines. They would buy them, and I would invoice. A fair number of those people did not need it. I know because several came back months later and mentioned they had quietly moved half their work down to cheaper addresses, and nothing changed. The reading I have to accept is that I had one thing in stock, and the story that made it the answer to every question. The story was true. It was being applied to jobs that never needed it. What changed my mind was doing the arithmetic on my own bills. I moved my monitoring and my light fetching down to data center addresses and saved more per month than I particularly want to say on camera. I got the residential unit wrong once too. I bought a small gigabyte package for a job I was sure was tiny, pointed it at a target that rendered every page in full, and burned the entire allowance inside a day. The job was small in requests and enormous in bytes. I had priced the wrong dimension completely. Winpiper Marmen times, Neajonam Pidantafidri. I cannot tell you what any particular site does with the registration data it collects. I see how requests from each tier land, and I infer, and I am wrong often enough to say so. I also cannot compare two providers inside the same tier from the outside. Two residential pools at an identical advertised rate can be sourced completely differently, and the only way to find out is to buy a small amount from each and measure what you get. And none of this is a promise about results. No tier guarantees a clean run on any target ever. The full comparison with the per gigabyte arithmetic and the real numbers behind my own lines is at proxyscraping.org. Subscribe for more on scraping with proxies.